China is accusing the U.S. of bullying and blackmail.
And this morning, Beijing is vowing to retaliate against President Trump's latest tariff threat, while the White House says China is making a big mistake. CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny is at the White House. So, Jeff, walk us through this new angry exchange between the U.S. and China.
Well, good morning, Pamela and Wolf. There's no better example of the trade war underway right now than looking at the United States and Canada. It all started at the beginning of the Trump administration when the president put on a 20% tariff against China because of fentanyl. Then, of course, he escalated last week. Then China escalated. And then the president escalated yesterday with a 50% tariff threat. The question is, what is the off-ramp for all of this? The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, did not signal an off-ramp this morning, but said this.
I think it was a big mistake, this Chinese escalation, because they're playing with a pair of twos. Traditionally, if you look at the history of the trade negotiations, we are the deficit country. So what do we lose by the Chinese raising tariffs on us? We export 1/5 to them of what they export to us. So that is a losing hand for them.
So the Treasury Secretary calls it a losing hand for China. We shall see. Of course, the United States depends on the goods from China. Certainly American consumers do. They've grown accustomed to the lower prices. But this is just one example of the trade war that is going on, even as this administration is signaling it is very open to negotiations with other allies. But again, of course, at midnight, these so-called reciprocal tariffs go into effect, and the China one would as well. When you add it all together, Wolf and Pamela, 104%. That is the percentage of tariffs that the U.S. now is threatening, at least, against Beijing.
Just to follow up with you, Jeff, for our viewers watching this, why should every American be paying attention to this escalation between the U.S. and China and how this could impact them directly?
Pamela, just look around your living room. If you're watching this at home, look at where your television comes from. Look at things in your garage, in your office, in your home office, in your kitchen. This is why this matters, because it drives the price up. Don't forget what a tariff is a tax on an imported good. So this is why all of this sort of confusing back and forth actually matters. Never mind the stock market. That's slightly separate here, and it's leveling off somewhat, but it's the price of American goods. But look, the bottom line of this, the Trump administration believes that it's time to do more American manufacturing, all kinds of goods, from electronics to jeans to cars. So that is what's at play here. But again, if you're sitting at home, look around your house. So many things likely came from China. Pamela.
All right. Jeff Zeleny, live for us at the White House. Thank you, Jeff. Wolf.
President Trump's tariffs could be the most significant from the United States in a century. Nearly everyone in the world will feel them, at least in some way.
And as Americans brace for the sting, we were just talking about that with Jeff, so are companies, big and small. So knowing how to navigate the minefield of a new tax landscape could be essential for economic survival. CNN's Tom Foreman is at the Magic Wall for us. Tom, walk us through how these tariffs work and who's on the hook for them.
You're absolutely right. Jeff is right. Wolf is right. You're all right to call it a tax, because that's what it is. Here's how it works. Foreign company produces goods to be sold in the U.S. They're shipped to the U.S. and they face the tariffs. U.S. companies pay the tariff. I put a caveat on that, to the U.S. Treasury. That's where the money goes, to the Treasury. And then companies pay the cost of the tariff, or they pass it on to consumers. And that really matters, because is it possible that a supplier could pay the entire tax when they send it? Possible. History says it's very unlikely. 50-50 split, the supplier and the business doing it? Also possible. This is the one that everybody says is what most often happens. There is some absorption along the way, and this is shown as an even split. But there's no indication that it will be an even split. And American consumers absolutely, Pam, are going to be hammered by this on many things, as Jeff noted, that you use and you touch every single day.
So a little more specific on that, what gets more expensive? What should we be bracing for as American consumers?
Well, as a practical matter, almost everything. Bananas up 10%, wine up 20%, coffee up 10%. Interesting point here. If you drink 1 cup of coffee a day, average price last year was about $3. That's going to be $100 more for your coffee every year. That's all there is to that. And then there are many other goods that will also be affected out there. Electronics, absolutely. You want a new phone, you want a new TV, you want a new anything in your house that's electronic. Almost all of it is tied to foreign manufacturing. Textiles, the jeans that were mentioned a minute ago, shirts, things like that. Footwear, sporting equipment, all sorts of things, medical equipment. It's impossible to keep up with all the things that are part of world trade. So all of that is potentially impacted by this and is being impacted by it right now.
So when are we going to start seeing these prices go up, Tom?
Well, Wolf, in some ways, that's a great question. We have targets out here, that say that tomorrow 50% reciprocal tariffs go into effect for dozens of countries. May 2nd, 54% tariff rate applied to packages less than $800 coming from China and Hong Kong. American consumers, do you sometimes buy something more than $800? Yeah. But you know who really is not affected, who is affected by this? They're applying this to those less than $800. So the wealthy people who are ordering great big things, they're off the hook. Everybody else is paying it then, if these dates hold, Wolf, because the administration has been so off and on with, we're putting on tariffs, we're suspending the tariffs, we're reinstituting the tariffs, we're changing the rate. It's really hard to keep track of what's happening minute to minute.
Yeah, we just heard the trade representative, Jamieson Greer, to the Senate say, yes, everything is still on. But then at the same time, the White House is saying that there are negotiations happening. More than 50 countries have come forward trying to negotiate. One country that isn't negotiating, that's really digging in its heels now, is China. So how could the escalating trade war impact American consumers in terms of the goods that we get from China?
Yeah, that's why, Pam, when they say, oh, well, China has a weak hand here, they only have a pair of twos. We're buying this stuff. American consumers are buying the stuff. That's part of this hand, too. Look, Temu over here, tons of consumer goods out there that people like to buy. They're doing very, very well. Shein does a lot of cosmetics and lifestyle products out there. Also big. AliExpress, this does marketing, direct marketing, tends to have a little longer delivery time, and they're trying to find buyers around the world to deal directly with Chinese companies. These are great big Chinese companies that Americans are dealing with in a very big way. So that's out there. And when you put it all together, and this is the part that people have to bear in mind, this is a tax. And one of the estimates right now is that the average home out there who's dealing with this annually from the budget lab at Yale University is going to pay close to $4,000 annually for this tariff plan. Now, the White House will say, no, 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 it's all going to come back. It's all going to be good in the meantime. But right now, if we're playing cards, that's the bet that your household has just put on the table, whether you want to or not. And you're hoping it doesn't come out that way for you.
Tom Foreman, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I guess, Pamela, with the price of coffee going up, my Venti Skim Latte at Starbucks is going to cost more money.
I was going to say, this is really bad news for us early birds, right? I'm so early. I love my coffee in the morning. I'm like, should I stockpile right now, before this goes into
All
effect?
right. Let's continue the conversation. Joining us now, CNN Global Economic Analyst Rana Foroohar. Rana, thanks so much for joining us. What are the consequences if the two sides continue this escalation?
Well, you just heard the biggest one, which is $4,000 a year. That is something that most average people simply cannot afford. There are a couple of other things that I would point to. I think that we're going to see continued stock market volatility, and that means big things for people with any money in the markets. Only a little over half of Americans have 401k plans, but a lot of Americans hold some stock, and the market itself being so jittery means that companies are buttoning down spending. That could affect jobs, that could affect the employment picture. So I'm expecting that volatility to continue until we have some real sense of where things have landed. I think the other thing to think about is, what's the end game here? Donald Trump hasn't spelled out too many details, but he's said in broad brush strokes that these tariffs are meant to bring jobs back to the U.S., help the U.S. reindustrialize. I would question that. I think tariffs are one tool in the toolbox. I was actually for tariffs in Trump 1 against China. They were surgical, they were very specific. But then you saw Joe Biden coming in and creating a domestic industrial policy, which is the other thing that you need in order to really bring manufacturing back. You saw the chips industry coming back thanks to that strategy in about 18 months. That's now being unraveled. So what I see is this one tool of tariffs being used as a very blunt instrument, a hammer to bang the entire world over the head. But you don't have that domestic piece. And I think without that, you're just not going to get the job growth that you're looking for.